thus far. And I have the opportunity to travel all around the world and speak in different places. And it's always, every time before I speak, what I like to do is I like to meditate and ask God to let me speak whatever you need to hear. And so this morning I was meditating in the room and getting ready, and the message was so simple. It was just about 2 words, which is love and faith. And I want to talk about how that transpires everything you do and how it made a difference in my life. And I want to let you know that I wasn't always raised in a model that taught me that. And so what happened is that when I was young, it was 1979, I was 3 years old. We were living in Iran, and we had to move to America because there was a revolution. I didn't really understand what was happening. It took about where my entire life was changed. And I remember moving to this country and watching my dad go through that process. And I watched how stress affected him and how nobody ever explained to him what he could do to help himself through that experience. And I watched how that stress caused him to have a heart attack. I watched how my dad have a stroke, how he had cancer 3 times. And I watched him struggle for most of his life because the one thing that he was missing was this knowledge that we possess, this chiropractic principle. And when he was challenged, he did everything he could, but he reached for control. He reached for making a change in the conditions in his life. And when he finally couldn't do that anymore, he gave up. I watched my dad go through cancer 3 different times. The 3rd time that he had cancer was right about the time I was graduating from Life University. It was 2001. And I remember coming home and my mother telling me how he was diagnosed with this cancer that spread all over his intestines. And they were giving my dad 3 weeks to live. And I was the youngest of 4 kids, and I was the only one that was going to be able to help him if anybody was going to be able to help him. And I remember going to the hospital. I remember that day so clearly, and I met with his oncologist, and I asked him what was going on, and the oncologist explained to me that the cancer spread everywhere, and he has 3 weeks to live. And I looked at the oncologist, and I said, well, then I'm going to need to go ahead and take care of him. And he looked at me, I'll never forget this, he had one comment, and he said, I don't know how old you are, but I've been doing this longer than you've been born. Your dad has 3 weeks to live. There is nothing you're going to do that's going to make a difference. And I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And I went into the emergency room, and my dad was laying there, and he had feeding tubes all over his body, and he could barely speak. And I remember the look on my family's face as they didn't know what to do to help him. And I knew that there was only one thing to do, which was release the power. That power that emanates this universe, that power that is within you, that power that heals the body, that power that runs the immune system, that power that allows everything to function at its potential. I knew that there was one thing for me to do. Find the interference, release the power. And I did that. And I did it over and over and over again. Not knowing whether it would work or not. I've never had a cancer patient before. I was only 22 years old. But I knew if there was anything that was going to help him, it was going to. And I had to step in this thing called faith and know that it would make a difference. Now, I could tell you I watched my dad go from being in the emergency room into a regular hospital bed because his blood pressure and his heart rate started getting more stable. Now, what allowed that to happen was not the technique I was doing. It wasn't me. It was innate intelligence. Innate intelligence knows how to regulate his blood pressure. Innate intelligence knew how to regulate his heart rate. The only reason why that wasn't happening is because it was being interfered with. So we found out where the interference was. We freed it up. When something's locked up, you unlock it. We unlocked it and allowed innates to take over. And as I was in that regular hospital bed, I remember coming in and looking at him and saying, he looks better today. He looks better. And he kept getting better. And it got to the point where he was able to get up and walk around, and the doctors were all amazed. They didn't understand what was happening. My mom finally started understanding chiropractic. Sometimes we try so hard to educate somebody on what chiropractic is, but you know what? When you walk chiropractic, when you experience chiropractic, it's a whole nother level. And so what happened is I watched my dad transform right before my eyes. I watched him go from being in the emergency room into a regular hospital bed, and then a month later, he wasn't even supposed to be alive. They released him into a rehabilitation center in Glen Cove, New York, right by my mom's house. And as he was there for another month, and we kept checking him and freeing up that power, allowing innate to do its job. After about a month of him being able to move around, they released him. My dad was home for Thanksgiving. 3 months after. And I remember looking at him, and he was sitting on the sofa couch, and he was watching TV, and I kept thinking, that is amazing. This is amazing. I didn't even realize how grandiose chiropractic was. And I thought I knew it back then. But my dad went for follow-up checkups. Every time he went, that cancer was smaller and smaller and smaller until it was completely gone. Now, I want to tell you, my dad had stage 4 cancer, and he completely healed up, but it wasn't because of me, it was because of innate. But had I not taken that leap of faith, and it was a leap, you could take a step of faith, this was a leap of faith. Had I not taken that leap of faith, my confidence, my conviction, my dad wouldn't have been alive. But you see, those experiences in your life, they mold you. They shaped my faith. They shaped my confidence. You can imagine what it was like when I opened up my office and a patient came in with whatever they came in with. I had no doubt they'd get better. One of my first patients, his name was Joe. He was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. He came in a wheelchair. And he was there with his sister and his mom, and they looked at me and they said, "Can you help me?" And the answer was absolutely. I believe that there's an intelligence within you that knows exactly what to do, and if it's not working, if your body's not working right, something is interfering with that. My job is to find the interference, release the interference, and allow the power that made the body to heal the body. I'll never forget, he looked at me, Joe looked at me, and he said, "Doc," he said, "I don't know how old you are, but you got more confidence, more faith than any doctor I've been to," and he says, You have more hope in me than anything I've ever seen before. And I said, "Joe, that's because I'm not putting my faith in my abilities. I'm putting my faith in the intelligence that created you, that created this universe, that guides everything." And I said, "I know that intelligence doesn't make any mistakes. I know the innate knows how to heal. All we need to do is find out what's interfering with it, Joe, and you're going to get well." And every time I'd give him an adjustment, I'd say, "You're on your way, you're on your way, you're getting better." I'll never forget, I watched Joe go from using this wheelchair to being able to use a walker, and coming in with a smile on his face and saying, "Dr. Ray, I never thought this was even possible." He kept getting better, and he'd come in with a cane. And he said, "Dr. Ray," he said, "I need a whole bunch of business cards." I said, "What are you going to do with those?" He said, "Well, I'm going to my Lou Gehrig specialist today. I'm going to hand them out in his waiting room." And I remember thinking, I'm going to get a call from this guy, all right? But needless to say, he did. In my first year in practice, I had 12 patients with Lou Gehrig's disease. Every which one got better. Why? Because you're always better off with a blockage off your spinal cord. You're always better off with more innate expressing. That's not a sometimes thing. It's a principle. It's a law. And I watched Joe make a recovery. I'll never forget this. Made a complete recovery. Complete recovery. This the guy was in a wheelchair, hands crippled, couldn't move his arms, right? And I'll never forget this day, because he wanted to go see his neurologist and show off. And I said, "Joe," I said, "man, don't do it." And he said, "Why not?" I said, "Because they're like masters of putting doubt and fear and worry in people." I said, "Just stay away from that. You don't need that." And he said, No, Doc, I need to go show him." And so he told me about this experience, because I saw him later that day, and he looked horrible. He said as soon as he got to the hospital, they recognized that Joe was standing, and so the nurse came over and said, "Whoa, you can't be walking around like that. You can fall." And she swiped out his legs with a wheelchair. She said, "When you're in the hospital, you got to be in a wheelchair." And then he went up and saw the neurologist, and he said to the neurologist, "Look, I got my muscle strength back. Check my arms, check my shoulder. I got my muscle strength back." And, they checked his muscle strength, and Joe was like, "It's a 5, right? It's a 5, right?" Doctor said, "No, it's a 4.7. Any which way to get doubt across, So here's Joe coming back to my office. And let me tell you something about adjustments. Sometimes we think the adjustment is a physical thing. I want you to understand it's an emotional thing. It's a mental thing. It's a spiritual thing. You got to adjust all of those variables. People have different layers to them. He was broken emotionally. He was broken spiritually by what they did. My adjustment with him was with my mouth to put faith, to speak faith over him, to speak love over him, to speak hope over him. He needed that. Thank God he came to me. Because if he didn't and he just went to that neurologist and never went anywhere else and he kept going back to medical doctors, if that neurologist had more influence on Joe than I did, he would have got sucked right down a dangerous path, right into destruction. So when people say, Dr. Ray, why do you learn how to communicate? Why do you train the way you do? You see, because I got to be influential. I got to be able to empower these people. I got to be able to inspire them. I got to be able to uplift them. I got to counterbalance what medical profession is going to do to them. And you got to be sharp with your communication. But more than that, you have to have an unshakable faith in this principle. It is extremely important that you immerse yourself in principle. It's got to be unshakable. Now, how do people get faith? I've realized over the years, I'm very observant, I realize that some people get their faith through their technique. They have a technique and they go, the technique works. And so they become technique practitioners. And then I've had a group of people that think that the faith that they get is just solely through science, which, science is amazing, and it definitely anchors you into an understanding that does strengthen your faith. There is no doubt about that. And so does your technique. But it's never one or the other, and I got to give you the most important one. You want to get faith, understand philosophy, understand innate intelligence, immerse yourself in innate intelligence, become one with innate intelligence. Learn how to quiet your educated and fire up the innate within you. And that is philosophy. That is the foundation of your faith. But I also found that it's the foundation of your love. Because you fall in love with innate. You fall in love with the principle. You fall in love with an understanding of above, down, inside out living. You begin to understand that this amazing intelligence that heals the body, that runs the body, that allows the chemistry to be right, that allows the brain chemistry, like John Minardi was talking about, the dopamine and the serotonin. There is an intelligence within you that organizes all of that. And when you begin to understand how powerful that intelligence is, then you begin to realize that it can also run your mouth when you need to speak. You don't have to plan what to say. It just comes. When you're with the patient and they have a response, you don't have time to go, let me think about what to say, I'll get back to you. That doesn't exist. You got to let innate take over. You see, because you can only get so far in volume if you're trying to do it with an educated brain or systems or procedures. If you're looking to get your stability and security from systems, you'll only get so far. And you need them. Because when a house is in order, it can experience more. But you get to that point where you got to give it up. You got to surrender it and trust that innate intelligence knows how to guide your life. It knows how to guide your practice. It knows how to get the right person at the right time in the right place in the right communication. All that is being guided like cells. What if every person in your practice was a different cell and you understood that there was an intelligence organizing all of it? Healing all of it. And you become a messenger. You're able to express that for them. But the greatest gift in the world is recognizing that there is an intelligence organizing everything in your life, and you can tune into that. And the way to tune into that is to learn how to quiet your mind. And focus in on the things that feel good. Focus in on the things that give you joy. Focus in on giving. Focus in on serving. Focus in on loving. You know, one of the most amazing things I found to be true about love is that when you give love, you fill yourself with it. The greatest gift is being full of it. But I found that love, see, people experience love in two different ways. One way that they experience it is really where they get approval from others. So what they do is they give it out in hopes that they're going to get something back. And when they get something back, they feel good. But then when they don't get something back, they feel bad. And when they don't feel bad, they husk their heart over. And I find that the chiropractor's job is really to understand the difference between whether they're getting sourced from source or sourced from people. And that is a huge distinction to make in your life. Because oftentimes I find that people find themselves having to get dipped more and more and more because they're getting husked. But the reason they're getting husked, the real foundation of that, is that instead of allowing love to flow through them and experiencing above-down love for their Creator, compassion goes one way, it doesn't come back, it just goes out. Praise, appreciation, these are forms of love that'll fill you of it so you can give it. But if you're giving with expectation of return, if you're giving and in turn you're expecting people to respond to you a certain way, you're going to get husked, especially as a chiropractor, because people are going to reject you all day, every day. And get used to it. If you had what everybody else already knew about, they wouldn't need you. So what you got to do is deliver something nobody else ever knew about. And so there are a lot of conformists. And you know, the greatest thing about that is that every one of those experiences will strengthen your faith, it'll strengthen your communication, it'll show you where your attachments are, it'll show you what skills you need. Everything that you need will constantly play out in your life. What I want you to understand is every experience serves when you begin to recognize that. You see, what got me into chiropractic, what got me into principle, what got me into above, down, inside out living was my dad's experience. When you go through an experience like that, sometimes you go, why the heck is this happening? This is a level of suffering. This is a level of, this shouldn't be happening. But you see, I could tell you that I'm standing here in front of you because of that experience. The greatest gift my dad gave me was the gift of a calling, the gift of a purpose, the gift of life. It was the contrast that led me to that. It was the challenge. It was the adversity. It was the thing that was extremely unwanted that led me to life. Where would I be without that experience? Sometimes it requires reflecting back on the things that shaped who you are and recognizing that the things that you thought were the worst parts of your life were actually molding you into what it is that you are to do. And I don't think that process will ever end. I can stand here in front of you and tell you that I didn't always have faith that I do today. I didn't always have love the way I do today. But there is still an infinite journey for me to travel on, and that love and that faith gets stronger every day. And every day I'm faced with understanding where it is that I have attachments, where it is that I'm still looking for a system or a person's behavior to make me feel good. Whether it's a staff member, whether it's a patient, you got to recognize those things. Because the only thing that has the ability to truly make you feel sustainably good is connecting to your innate intelligence. And the only way to do that is to quiet your educated brain and then go ahead and start appreciating and serving and loving and doing what makes you on the inside feel the most joyful. The purpose of life is to be able to connect with that amazing intelligence, because innate is connected to universal, which is another name for God. So it's a oneness. It's a unification. See, the world divides everything. It takes chiropractic schools, and divides them. But you can unify on one front. You can unify on love. Love unites. The ego separates. It's extremely important to understand the difference. You know, people can have completely different preferences than you, and you could still love them the same. You don't need to judge people for that. See, chiropractic gets caught up in that sometimes because we start judging the medical profession. We start judging the medical doctor. We start judging the patients that are going to medicine. And you know, judgment is the opposite of love. You can't do both. Your Creator doesn't judge you, just loves you. So the more you love, the more you become one with your Creator. The more you become one with Source, the more you can heal people. If you're resonating with love pouring out of your hands and love pouring out of your presence and love everywhere you go, you just love everyone. I had a good friend of mine who went on a mission trip a long time ago. I'll never forget his story. He told me how they were taking these big vans and they were pulling up to the different areas. And, you know, there were thousands of people waiting to get adjusted. He said he got the only thing he knew to do was adjust, and he started adjusting people just right out of the van, like his first step out. And he said, Ray, that's when I realized that the only technique there was love. It was just pure giving, and nothing was holding him back. No belief systems, no attachments, no concern about what this person would say, whether they'd come back and say, well, doc, you know what, my neck still bothers me. None of that was there. It was just pure love. You have that within you. You have a presence within you of that beautiful, magnificent, innate intelligence that permeates this universe. It'll learn your life. It'll lead your life. But you got to get quiet enough and you got to get loving enough to be able to really connect with it and hear what it's telling you to do and be called and follow the call. Follow the call. Follow the heart. Follow the innate intelligence. Learn to develop your love. Learn to develop your faith. It'll just enhance it. But I'm just saying, if we could be more mindful of the thoughts that we have and the words that we speak, and if we really started paying attention to realize that the words are either words of love that are giving life, words of faith that are giving life, or words of judgment that are destroying somebody. And you realize that every time you speak on the outside, you're also impressing your own mind. And if you can walk around feeling completely safe and blessed that there is an intelligence permeating this universe that is protecting and guiding and loving and blessing you at all times, I promise you, you'll get a whole bunch of blessings. Because it's not through action, but it's through alignment that your life is blessed. Thank you, everyone.